"You'll end up just like your father," my stepfather shouted as he kicked me out. I still remember the exact moment my life changed forever. It was summer 1998. I was 10 years old, and my dad and I were sitting around a campfire in Yosemite. Most kids got Disney World or water parks for vacation. I got geology lessons and stars. That's what happens when your father is Professor James White, the Indiana Jones of San Francisco State University, as his students called him. The fire crackled as Dad pulled something from his pocket, wrapped in a faded red cloth. His eyes had that sparkle they only got when he was about to share something ancient with me. "Ollie, I want to show you something special," he said, carefully unwrapping what turned out to be a jade pendant, carved into the shape of what looked like a screaming jaguar. The firelight made it seem alive, almost pulsing with energy. "This is from the lost city of Itzamel." I ran my finger over the smooth stone, feeling tiny notches that I realized were Mayan glyphs. "Where's Itzamel?" I asked. Try not to sound too impressed because, 10-year-olds have a reputation to maintain. Dad laughed. "That's the million-dollar question. Some believe it's just a legend, a place mentioned in several ancient texts but never found. I believe it's real, hidden somewhere in the jungles of southern Mexico." He wrapped the pendant back up. "Finding it has been my dream since I was your age." Looking back now, I realized that was the moment the seed was planted. Some kids dreamed of being astronauts or baseball players. I started dreaming of lost cities. The following summer, Dad surprised me by asking if I wanted to join his expedition to Teotihuacan. Mom nearly had a heart attack. Her only child traipsing through Mexico instead of going to baseball camp like normal kids. But Dad convinced her it would be educational. The academic's ultimate trump card. Stepping onto those ancient stone pathways for the first time felt like walking through a portal. The Pyramid of the Sun loomed over everything. This massive testament to human determination built without wheels or metal tools. I remembered staring up at it, calculating how many flights of stairs I'd have to climb at home to equal the height, when Dad nudged me. "The Mayans didn't build this," he whispered, like he was sharing a state secret. "Everyone thinks that, but it was actually built by the Teotihuacanos. The Mayans came later, but they were remarkable in their own right. Their mathematics and astronomy were centuries ahead of Europeans." That's how Dad operated, always teaching, always correcting. While other parents brought back T-shirts from their trips, mine brought knowledge bombs and the occasional ancient artifact replica. When I was 12, Dad took me to Palenque. That's where I met Emma Miller. Her dad, Dr. Miller, was Dad's colleague specializing in Mayan writing systems. Emma was 13, with copper-red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and freckles that multiplied in the Mexican sun. She wore hiking boots that had seen better days and knew more about Mayan calendar systems than any teenager should. We were instant friends. Or enemies. It was hard to tell at first. "You're standing on an important carving," were her first words to me, pointing down at what looked like just another stone to my untrained eye. I jumped off it like it was hot lava. "Sorry, I didn't know." She rolled her eyes. "Obviously, just because your dad's famous doesn't mean you can trump around on history." I felt my face burning. "He's not famous. He's just a professor." "Whatever. Dr. White is practically a legend in archaeological circles. Everyone knows about his Itzamel obsession." That caught me off guard. I didn't realize Dad's quest was common knowledge in the archaeology world. For me, it was just the bedtime stories he told me. Tales of a golden city with advanced astronomical knowledge, hidden chambers filled with ancient texts, and possibly the answers to why the Mayan civilization suddenly collapsed. Emma softened when she saw my surprise. "Want to see something cool? The adults are too busy arguing about dating techniques to notice if we slip away for a bit." We shouldn't have wandered off, but 12-year-olds aren't exactly known for risk assessment. Emma led me to a partially excavated area away from the main ruins. "Look at this," she whispered, pointing to a small mound of dirt. "See how the soil's a different color? Something's buried there." I didn't see anything special, but I wasn't about to admit that. Instead, I knelt down and carefully started brushing away dirt with my hand. About an inch down, my fingers hit something solid. My heart nearly exploded when I uncovered a small clay figurine. maybe 3 inches tall, of a round-bellied woman with her hands on her hips. "Whoa, unbelievable," Emma whispered, her eyes wide. "That's a fertility goddess. You just found an actual artifact." I held the small figure in my palm, feeling the weight of centuries. "What do we do with it?" "We have to tell them, obviously," Emma said, already standing. This could be important. That little clay figure changed everything. The archaeologists were thrilled, the location was documented, and Emma and I became the dig site celebrities for about 15 minutes. More importantly, it cemented our friendship. Finding something that had been waiting underground for 1,000 years does that to people. The coolest part of that expedition wasn't the ruins or even finding the figurine. It was meeting people who were actual descendants of the Mayans. Our group visited a nearby village where many of the traditions were still practiced. They didn't live in ancient pyramids or sacrifice people like the History Channel documentaries might have you believe, but they still spoke Mayan languages and kept many of the old ways alive. This man named Esteban showed us how they made traditional corn tortillas, the same way their ancestors had for thousands of years. He let me try grinding the corn on this stone tool called matate. After 5 minutes, my arms were burning, and I'd made enough for maybe one small tortilla. Esteban's wife had been laughing at my technique the entire time. "My 6-year-old granddaughter grinds better than you," she teased through Emma's dad, who translated. I wasn't offended. She was absolutely right. What really blew my mind was when Esteban's teenage son Carlos showed us their family's copy of an ancient calendar and explained how they still used it to determine the best times for planting and harvesting. He pointed to different symbols and rattled off their meanings with the same casual confidence I had talking about PlayStation games. He says the traditional knowledge works better than the modern weather forecasts. Dr. Miller translated. They've been testing it against scientific methods for generations, and the ancient calendar is still more accurate. Dad looked like he might burst from excitement. This was what he lived for, proof that ancient wisdom held real, practical value. That night, he stayed up late talking with the village elders, with Dr. Miller translating. I fell asleep to the sound of their voices, wondering what secrets they were sharing. 3 years passed with me tagging along on Dad's summer expeditions. Each trip deepened my fascination with the ancient world, especially the Mayans. I started learning Spanish in school, hoping it would help in future expeditions. Emma and I kept in touch through emails and the occasional phone call. Our friendship built on our shared experiences and passion for archaeology. The summer I turned 15, Dad was preparing for an expedition to Chiapas, a region in southern Mexico rumored to hold clues about Itzmal. For the first time since I was 10, I wouldn't be going with him. My final exams were scheduled right in the middle of the expedition dates, and Mom had put her foot down, education first, ancient mysteries second. Even Dr. Miller wouldn't be joining Dad this time. He'd caught some nasty tropical bug on their previous expedition and was still recovering. Dad would be heading out with a smaller team, mostly graduate students and a local guide. The night before he was set to leave, Dad called me into his study. The room smelled of old books and the coffee he perpetually drank. "Ollie, I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his desk drawer. This belonged to my father and his father before him. Inside was an antique pocket watch, its silver case tarnished with age. When I flipped it open, I found an inscription on the inside of the cover. "Time reveals all mysteries." "This expedition is different," Dad said, his voice more serious than I was used to. "We're following new leads about Itzmal's location. If we're right..." He trailed off, his eyes distant with possibilities. I closed my hand around the watch, feeling it steady ticking against my palm like a tiny heartbeat. Something in Dad's tone made me both excited and nervous. "I wish I could go with you," I said, trying not to sound as disappointed as I felt. "There will be other expeditions," Dad assured me. "Besides, someone needs to hold down the fort while I'm gone." He ruffled my hair like he used to do when I was younger. "Time reveals all mysteries," I repeated, running my thumb over the engraved words. Dad nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "And some mysteries have been waiting a very long time to be revealed." I couldn't have known then how prophetic those words would turn out to be, or how that pocket watch would become much more than just a family heirloom. as Dad packed his bags that night, and I reluctantly prepared for another week of algebra and history tests. I had no idea that his expedition to Chiapas would change everything, not just for him and me, but potentially for our understanding of an entire civilization. I still remember that night in excruciating detail. The soft blue glow of my alarm clock reading 3:17 a.m. The sound of rain pelting against my bedroom window. Mom's face as she flipped on my light, without warning, her eyes red-rimmed and wild. "Ollie, wake up." Her voice was strange, stretched in like it might snap. "Something's happened." I sat up, instantly alert in that way you are when you know, deep in your gut, that your world is about to change. Mom sat on the edge of my bed, her hands trembling slightly. Dr. Rodriguez just called from Mexico. Dr. Rodriguez was Dad's colleague, the one leading the expedition with him. There was a landslide in Chiapas after the heavy rains. Your father's expedition team, they're missing. Missing. Not dead. Missing. I clung to that distinction like a lifeline. The next few weeks became a blur of phone calls, embassy contacts, and search parties. I wanted to fly down immediately, but Mom refused. Too dangerous. Too chaotic. I was too young. The Mexican authorities were doing everything possible. We just had to wait. Days stretched into weeks. Weeks into months. Search parties found equipment, scattered supplies, but no people, no bodies either, which I pointed out repeatedly. Dad could still be out there, lost but alive. Maybe they found shelter in a cave, or were taken in by a remote village. Maybe they discovered Itzmal itself, and lost track of time exploring it. I came up with countless scenarios, each more elaborate than the last. Mom listened less and less as time went on. After 6 months, she stopped pretending to believe he might come back. After a year, she had his death certificate issued based on presumptive death. I refused to attend the memorial service. How could we memorialize someone who might still be alive? Life has a way of moving forward whether you're ready or not. By the time I turned 16, Mom had moved on. That's a phrase everyone used, like Dad was just a phase she was going through. Her new boyfriend, Robert, was everything Dad wasn't: practical, punctual, and painfully predictable. He worked in real estate development, wore suits even on weekends, and thought archaeology was a fascinating hobby, but hardly a sensible career. I hated him immediately, of course. It was practically my duty as a teenage son. Mom started changing too. She cut her hair short, traded her comfortable jeans and archaeological conference t-shirts for sleek dresses and heels. She took up tennis at Robert's Country Club and started using words like networking and investment portfolio. Sometimes I'd look at her across the dinner table and wonder who this stranger was wearing my mother's face. Robert moved in when I was 16 and a half. His condo had sold faster than expected, and it just made sense for him to move in with us while they looked for a bigger house together. I came home from school one day to find his golf clubs in the hall closet and his toiletries in the bathroom. Mom didn't even warn me. The real gut punch came a month before my 17th birthday, when Mom announced she was pregnant. They hadn't planned it, she explained with this weird, giddy smile, but they were thrilled. Robert put his arm around her shoulders, and they looked at me expectantly, waiting for my congratulations. I mumbled something appropriate and escaped to my room, where I pulled out Dad's pocket watch and held it so tight the edges dug into my palm. The ticking felt like Morse code, like Dad was trying to tell me something across whatever distance separated us. Michael Robert Henderson arrived when I was 3 months into my senior year of high school. Suddenly, our house was filled with baby equipment, the constant sound of crying, and visitors cooing over the miracle baby. Robert's parents visited from Connecticut and made themselves at home in what used to be Dad's study, which had already been converted to a nursery. I found Dad's old books in cardboard boxes in the garage. The night after Michael's christening, Mom caught me in the kitchen, making myself dinner at 9 p.m. after getting off my shift at Java Junction, the coffee shop where I'd been working part-time. "There's no need to slam the microwave door," she said, bouncing Michael on her hip. The baby was fussy, and Mom looked exhausted. "Sorry," I muttered, not feeling sorry at all. "There wasn't anything ready, so I'm heating up yesterday's pizza." Mom sighed. "Ollie, you're practically an adult now. You know where the grocery money is, and you know how to cook basic meals. I can't be expected to feed a baby and a grown man. That stung. I wasn't asking for gourmet meals, just some acknowledgement that I still lived here too. More and more often, I'd come home to find dinner already finished, dishes washed, and a single plate with my portion in the fridge with a sticky note. Heat for 2 minutes. Sometimes there wasn't even that, just a note saying pizza in freezer, or make yourself a sandwich. Sure, Mom, I'm practically an adult, just not adult enough to go to Mexico and look for Dad. The low blow landed exactly as intended. Mom's face tightened and she turned away. We are not having this argument again. Your father is gone, Ollie. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can move forward with your life. Move forward. Those words again. Like life was a highway and you just had to keep driving, never looking back, never stopping to search for those left behind. 2 weeks before graduation, I was digging through the garage looking for my old baseball glove. Coach had convinced me to join the faculty versus seniors game, mostly because our team was desperate for anyone who could remotely hit a ball. The garage had become the place where memories went to die, boxes stacked on boxes of our former life. I spotted a crate labeled James' office that I hadn't seen before. It must have been moved from the storage unit Mom had initially rented for Dad's things. My heart raced as I pulled it down from the shelf and pried open the lid. Inside were Dad's personal items from his university office. His favorite coffee mug with the Indiana Jones quote, framed photos of archaeological sites, a paperweight shaped like a Mayan pyramid. But underneath those, wrapped in an old T-shirt, was his expedition journal. I glanced toward the door, suddenly feeling like I was doing something forbidden. Then I remembered this was my dad's journal, and I had every right to it. I tucked it under my arm along with a manila envelope that had my name written on it in Dad's handwriting. Back in my room, I opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter dated just before his final expedition. Ollie, asterisk if you're reading this. Something has gone wrong. I've always prepared for contingencies. Occupational hazard of working in remote locations. I hope this letter gathers dust in my desk drawer for decades, and we laugh about my paranoia when I'm old and gray. Asterisk. But if not, I need you to know a few things. Asterisk first. I've loved being your father more than anything in this world. Watching your mind open to the mysteries of the past has been my greatest joy. Asterisk. Asterisk second. The work I'm doing in Chiapas is more important than I've let on. The clues about Itel are real, and they're leading somewhere significant. My research notes and maps are my expedition journal. Guard them carefully. Asterisk. Asterisk if I don't return. And if archaeology still calls to you when you're older, consider taking up where I left off. But only if it's truly your passion. Don't chase my ghost out of obligation. Asterisk. Asterisk time reveals all mysteries. Son. Sometimes we just need to be patient enough to wait for the revelations. Asterisk. All my love. Dad. I sat there, letter in one hand, pocket watch in the other, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Dad had known the expedition was dangerous. He prepared for the possibility of not coming back, and he'd left me his research. The journal was filled with notes, maps, reference sketches, and translations of Mayan glyphs. One page had a rough map of the Chiapas region, with several areas circled in red. Notes in the margins read, astronomical alignment confirmed, and temple doorway faces Venus rising point. Whatever Dad had been tracking, he believed it pointed to the location of Itel. And now I was the only one who knew. Things came to a head 3 days before graduation. I came home from my last shift at Java Junction. I'd put in my notice since I was heading to college in the fall. To find Robert waiting for me in the kitchen. His face was that particular shade of red it got when he was about to lecture me about responsibility. Oliver, did you take my watch? His voice was accusatory, not questioning. I blinked, genuinely confused. What watch? My Rolex. The one I always keep on my dresser. It was there this morning, and now it's gone. You were home alone after we left for Michael's doctor appointment. I didn't take your watch, Robert. I wasn't even going to dignify the accusation with more of a response than that. Mom walked in, Michael fussing in her arms. What's going on? Robert explained his missing watch theory. I expected Mom to at least question it, to give me the benefit of the doubt. Instead, she looked at me with tired eyes. Ollie, this is serious. That watch is worth thousands. I didn't take it. Why would I steal your stupid watch? Robert's face darkened. Because you resented me from day one. This could be your idea of payback. Heat rushed to my face. That's ridiculous. Check my room if you don't believe me. This attitude is exactly the problem, Robert said, his voice rising. No respect for authority. No sense of responsibility. You know what? You're going to end up just like your father, a failure chasing fairy tales in the jungle. The room went silent, except for Michael's fussing. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to defend Dad, to say something, anything. She just stood there, bouncing Michael gently, eyes on the floor. My father wasn't a failure, I said, my voice low and dangerous. He was brilliant and passionate and brave. Don't you dare talk about him like that. Robert scoffed. Brave? He abandoned his family for some mythical city no one's ever found. And look where it got him. I turned to Mom. Are you going to let him talk about Dad like that? In our house? Mom finally spoke, her voice strained. Ollie, please. Let's not make this worse. Make it worse? He just called Dad a failure, and you didn't say a word. Robert stepped closer, pointing his finger at my chest. Listen carefully, Oliver. This is my house now. You either follow my rules and show some respect, or you can find somewhere else to live. Again, I looked at Mom. This was the moment she should step in. Stand up for me. Remind Robert that this was still my home, too. Instead, she shifted Michael to her other hip and remained silent, effectively making her choice. Something broke inside me in that moment. Something that had been barely holding together since Dad disappeared. Fine, I said quietly. I'll be gone by tomorrow. In my room, I pulled out my duffel bag and started packing. Dad's journal and letter went in first, followed by clothes, my laptop, and the books I'd been studying. The pocket watch went into my jeans pocket, where I could feel its reassuring weight. I was gone before they woke up the next morning. I'd managed to sublet a cheap apartment near the community college where I'd enrolled for summer classes. The plan was to save money for a year, then transfer to university with a strong archaeology program. Neither Mom nor Robert showed up for my graduation. I told myself I didn't care, but I scanned the audience anyway, some stubborn part of me hoping to see them. After the ceremony, I went back to my apartment alone. 2 days later, Mom called. Her voice was tentative, apologetic. Ollie, Robert's watch turned up. He left it at the gym. He feels terrible about accusing you. I said, nothing, waiting. You can come home now. We can put this all behind us. That's it? No apology for him calling Dad a failure? No apology from you for standing there and letting him kick me out? Ollie, please. Robert's under a lot of stress with a new baby and... Stop making excuses for him. I cut her off. I'm not coming back to a house where someone can trash Dad's memory, and you don't even defend him. He didn't mean. Yes, he did. And when it mattered, you chose him over Dad. Over me? There was silence on the line for several seconds. So what now? She finally asked. I'm going to finish what Dad started, I said, looking down at the journal open on my desk. I'm going to find out what happened to him. Mom sighed. Please don't throw away your future chasing ghosts, Ollie. I'm not chasing ghosts, Mom. I'm honoring Dad's legacy. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. I hung up before she could respond. Maybe it was harsh, but nothing I said wasn't true. As I sat there, Dad's pocket watch in my hand, I made a promise to myself. I would find out what happened in those jungles. I would finish what Dad started. And maybe, just maybe, I'd prove Robert wrong about both of us. Dad's journal sat on the passenger seat. Inside it were the clues to a mystery that consumed him. And now it was my turn to follow the trail. At 18, with nothing but pocket watch, a journal, and a stubborn streak a mile wide, I was about to chase a legend into the unknown. College turned out to be a bust. Not because of grades or workload, but because I couldn't focus on general education requirements while my dad's journal burned a hole in my backpack. I dropped out after one semester and picked up more shifts at a new coffee shop job at the De Young Museum in San Francisco. The pay was decent, and more importantly, I was surrounded by ancient artifacts all day. Sometimes during breaks, I'd wander the exhibits, notebook in hand, comparing symbols and patterns to the ones in Dad's journal. The universe has a weird way of dropping breadcrumbs exactly when you need them. 6 months after moving out of Mom's house, the DeYoung announced a special exhibition, Mysteries of the Maya, Cosmology and Power. I nearly spilled an entire latte on a customer when I saw the banner going up in the main hall. The first day of the exhibition, I showed up an hour early for my shift just to walk through before the crowds arrived. The collection was impressive: jade masks, ceramic vessels, stone tablets covered in glyphs. But it was a small obsidian disc in the third display case that stopped me cold. Carved into its surface was a symbol I recognized immediately: a stylized jaguar with stars for eyes, identical to one sketched in Dad's journal and labeled Itel Guardian. I must have been staring at it for too long, because Dr. Ramirez, the curator, appeared at my elbow. "Fascinating piece, isn't it?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. "On loan from a private collection. Do you know what the symbol means?" I tried to sound casual, just a curious barista making conversation. "It's associated with a mythical city called Itzamel," she said. The jaguar was believed to guard the entrance to a sacred place where time behaved differently. Pure mythology, of course, but beautiful symbolism. My heart was pounding so hard I was surprised she couldn't hear it. "Is there any evidence this place actually existed?" Dr. Ramirez smiled the way academics do when humoring an enthusiast. "No archaeological evidence has confirmed it. Some texts mention it, but they're as reliable as tales of El Dorado or Atlantis." "Why the interest?" I shrugged. "Just curious. My dad was an archaeologist. James White, he studied Mayan sites." Her expression changed instantly. "James White? I knew your father. We collaborated on a paper about astronomical alignments at Palenque years ago. I was devastated to hear about the accident. After my shift, we talked for over an hour. She remembered Dad as brilliant but cautious, which made his disappearance all the more puzzling to her. When I mentioned I had his research journal, her eyes widened. "Oliver, if you're serious about following your father's work, you need to talk to Daniel Miller at UCLA. He was on several expeditions with your father before the Chiapas incident." Dr. Miller, Emma's dad. The name brought back memories of sunburned shoulders and clay figurines and a red-headed girl correcting my pronunciation of Mayan deity names. "Is he still teaching?" I asked. "Yes, and he's been continuing some of the research lines he and your father established. If anyone would understand James's notes, it would be Daniel." The UCLA campus was sprawling and intimidating, full of students who seemed to know exactly where they were going and why they were there. I felt like an imposter in my coffee shop jeans and thrift store button-up, clutching Dad's journal as if it were some kind of admission ticket. I found Dr. Miller's office in the anthropology building. The door was open, revealing walls covered in maps and bookshelves overflowing with academic texts. Dr. Miller himself sat at his desk, older than I remembered, his beard now more gray than brown. He was typing furiously on a laptop and didn't notice me until I cleared my throat. He looked up, annoyed at first, then confused, and finally shocked. "Oliver White? My God, is that you?" I nodded, suddenly nervous. "Hi, Dr. Miller. Sorry to drop in without warning." He stood and came around the desk, then hesitated, as if unsure whether to shake my hand or hug me. He opted for an awkward pat on the shoulder. "You look just like your father did at your age," he said, his voice thick. "What brings you here?" I held up Dad's journal. I need to understand what he was working on, what he found in Chiapas. Dr. Miller's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, concern, caution. "Oliver, that expedition was nearly 4 years ago. The authorities conducted extensive searches." "I know, but Dad believed Itzamel was real. He had evidence." I placed the journal on his desk, open to the page with the jaguar symbol. The same symbol is on display at the DeYoung right now. Dr. Miller studied the page, then sank back into his chair. "Sit down, Oliver. This conversation might take a while. For the next 2 hours, we pored over Dad's journal together. Dr. Miller confirmed what I'd suspected. Dad had discovered a pattern in astronomical alignments at several Maya sites that, when mapped, pointed to an unexplored region of Chiapas. The landslide that had allegedly claimed his expedition had occurred precisely in that area. Your father was onto something significant, Dr. Miller admitted. But these jungle regions are dangerous. Flash floods, landslides, wildlife, disease, not to mention potential conflict with locals or armed groups. There's a reason the university refused to fund a follow-up expedition. But you believe him about it some more? Dr. Miller sighed. James was the most methodical researcher I've ever known. If he thought the evidence pointed to Itel, I can't dismiss it. He hesitated. How serious are you about this, Oliver? It's all I've thought about for years. Then there's someone else you should talk to. He picked up his phone and sent a text. My daughter Emma is finishing her master's in Mesoamerican epigraphy here. She's become quite the expert in Mayan glyphs. She might see things in these notes that even I can't. 10 minutes later, the office door flew open, and there she was. Emma Miller had grown taller. Her copper hair was shorter now, cut in a practical bob, but her freckles and direct gaze were exactly as I remembered. She stopped short when she saw me, her eyes widening. Ollie White? Is that you? Hey, Emma. I managed an awkward wave. Long time no see. Dad said he was talking to someone about the Chiapas expedition, but I didn't realize it was you. Her gaze dropped the journal on the desk. Is that your father's? Yeah. I found it after he was declared dead. Something flashed across her face. Sympathy, but also excitement. May I? She asked, gesturing to the journal. I nodded, and she immediately sat down and began flipping through pages, occasionally muttering to herself. Her fingers traced the glyphs Dad had copied, her brow furrowing in concentration. This section here, she said, pointing to a page dense with symbols. It's a variant dialect of Yucatec Maya, but with some unusual grammatical structures. But I recognize these calendrical markings. They're referring to a specific astronomical event. Dr. Miller leaned over her shoulder. Can you translate it? Emma pulled a notebook from her bag and began scribbling rapidly. Roughly, it says, when a morning star rises in a house of night, the path to the timeless one reveals itself. It's describing Venus appearing in a specific constellation as a marker or guide. She looked up at me, her eyes bright. This is incredible. Your dad was tracking Venus alignments that only happen once every 8 years. And I prompted, my heart racing. And according to these calculations, the next alignment is happening in less than 6 months. That night, Emma invited me to dinner at her apartment near campus. The initial awkwardness between us dissolved as we hunched over Dad's journal and her reference books, piecing together the puzzle he'd left behind. I can't believe you kept on with Maya studies, I said as she translated another passage. Emma shrugged. After meeting your dad and seeing how passionate he was about preserving these cultures and their knowledge, how could I not? He inspired me. Something warm and painful twisted in my chest. Thanks for saying that. It's just the truth. She looked up from her work. I was really sorry to hear about what happened. I wanted to reach out, but Dad said your mom was being protective, keeping you away from anything that reminded you of the expedition. More like keeping herself away. I muttered, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, it's complicated. Emma nodded, not pushing for details. So what's your plan here, Ollie? Just understanding what happened, or trying to finish what he started? I finished for her. I don't know. At first, I just wanted answers. But seeing all this, I gestured to the journal. Dad was right at the edge of a major discovery. How can I just leave that? It would be dangerous, she warned. That region is remote, largely unmapped. The same hazard that might have claimed your father's expedition will be waiting for anyone who followed. I know, but I have to try. Emma studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Well, you can't go alone. And you'll need someone who can read the glyphs in situ. I blinked. Are you offering to help? I'm offering to lead the epigraphic analysis. she corrected primly. My thesis advisor would kill me if I passed up the chance to document potentially undiscovered Maya texts. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Emma Miller, are you using my lost father as an excuse for academic advancement? She blushed slightly. I prefer to think of it as mutually beneficial collaboration. Dr. Miller took some convincing. He paced his office the next day, listing all the reasons the expedition was a terrible idea. But I could see the excitement in his eyes, the same spark Dad used to get when talking about his research. Your father was my best friend, not just my colleague, he finally admitted, stopping his pacing. When the university refused to fund a search expedition, I nearly went anyway. My own health issues stopped me. He touched his leg unconsciously, and I remembered Emma mentioning he'd had knee surgery. But I've always wondered if I could have found him if I'd tried harder. Then help us now. I urged. We need your expertise, your connections. And your grant funding, Emma added bluntly. We can position this as an extension of your work on Maya astronomical practices. Dr. Miller sighed, but I could tell he was wavering. Even if, and this is a huge if, I could secure funding under my current research grant. We'd need proper training, equipment, local guides. I've been saving every penny for my coffee shop job, I said. I can contribute. And I have contacts at the Institute of Maya Studies in Chiapas from my field work last summer, Emma added. Dr. Miller looked between us, then threw up his hands. James would come back from the dead just to haunt me if I let his son wander into the jungle unprepared. He sat down at his computer. I'll reach out to my contacts at the Smithsonian. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. The next 3 months were a crash course in expedition planning. Dr. Miller called in favors from colleagues across the archaeological community. I quit my job at the museum to focus on preparation full-time, living on instant ramen and determination. Weekdays were for research, analyzing satellite imagery of the target region, studying the geological surveys of the area, and learning everything we could about the previous expedition's route. Weekends were for training, wilderness first aid, basic survival techniques, even self-defense classes. Emma turned out to be unexpectedly skilled at bushcraft, having spent summers doing field work in remote areas. The first rule of jungle survival, she informed me as we practiced setting up emergency shelters, is accepting that everything is trying to kill you. The weather, the wildlife, the plants, even the water. Once you make peace with that, the rest is just technique. Her practical competence was impressive, but it was her mind that truly amazed me. Emma could stare at a page of Dad's notes for 10 minutes and suddenly see connections that had eluded me for months. Where I saw random squiggles in the Maya glyphs, she read stories of kings and gods. Working with her, I began to understand why Dad had been so obsessed with these ancient mysteries. They weren't just puzzles to solve. They were voices from the past, waiting to be heard again. Dr. Miller secured a modest research grant on the guise of studying astronomical alignment markers in peripheral Maya sites. It wouldn't fund a major expedition, but combined with my savings and some equipment loaned by the archaeology department, we had enough to make it work. The most valuable connection came through a Smithsonian archaeologist who provided us with detailed maps and information about the region where Dad's expedition had disappeared. This insider knowledge would be crucial for navigating the remote terrain safely. As our departure date approached, a strange calm settled over me. After years of feeling powerless, of wondering what had happened in those distant jungles, I was finally taking action. Whether we found Itzamul or not, whether we discovered what had happened to Dad or not, at least I would know I had tried. The night before our flight to Mexico, I sat alone in my apartment, Dad's pocket watch in hand. The inscription caught the light. Time reveals all mysteries. Tomorrow, we would begin following a trail of astronomical clues and ancient symbols into one of the most remote regions of Chiapas, armed with satellite phones, GPS trackers, and every safety precaution we could manage. Dr. Miller had arranged for specialized training with experts from the Smithsonian who had experience with jungle expeditions. They drilled us on everything from avoiding poisonous plants to navigating by stars if our equipment failed. We pored over detailed topographical maps, identifying potential hazards and plotting emergency extraction routes. One consultant, a former military survival specialist, made us practice purifying water and identifying edible plants until we could do it blindfolded. "You're preparing like you're going to war," the specialist had commented, watching me meticulously pack and repack my expedition gear. Maybe I was. But this wasn't just an archaeological expedition for me. It was a mission to find answers about Dad, about Itzamel, about the path my life had taken since that night Mom woke me with news of a landslide half a world away. Tomorrow, we would take the first step on that path. And whatever waited for us in the jungles of Chiapas, I was finally ready to face it. The flight to Tuxtla Gutierrez was bumpy as hell. Emma spent most of it reviewing her notes, seemingly unbothered by the turbulence that had me white-knuckling the armrest. Dr. Miller dozed off somehow, his head lolling against a window, the expedition gear catalog he'd been reading still open on his lap. I envied his ability to sleep through what felt like certain death. Once we landed, we drove 4 hours to San Cristobal de las Casas, an old colonial town nestled in the highlands of Chiapas. The place was gorgeous, with cobblestone streets and colorful buildings set against green mountains, but my appreciation was dampened by the thick clouds rolling in. Our timing was far from ideal. The rainy season was just starting, and the air felt heavy with moisture. Our local contact, arranged through Smithsonian, met us at a small cafe off the main plaza. Juan Vasquez was shorter than me, but built like someone who spent his life outdoors. Weather-beaten face, calculating eyes, and the callous hands of a person who did real work for a living. He'd been a ranger at the nearby national park for 15 years before starting his own guide service, and within 5 minutes of conversation, I understood why the Smithsonian had recommended him. Juan spread a map across the table, his finger tracing the route we'd planned based on Dad's journal. Then he shook his head. According to Juan, our carefully planned expedition route was basically a death wish. The area we needed to reach was already difficult to access in the dry season. With the rains coming, certain paths would be completely washed out, rivers would be swollen and impassable, and landslides, like the one that had claimed Dad's expedition, would be a constant threat. When he mentioned landslides, Dr. Miller and I exchanged glances. Neither of us had voiced it, but I knew we were both wondering the same thing. Were we walking into the same trap that had taken Dad? Juan noticed our hesitation and gestured toward the darkening sky outside the cafe window. The rainy season was ramping up, with storms getting stronger each week. We had maybe 3 weeks before hurricane season would make the expedition completely impossible. If we were going to do this, it had to be now, and it had to be fast. Emma, ever practical, asked about local guides and porters. One explained that most experienced guides wouldn't take a job like this during the rainy season. Too dangerous, too unpredictable. But he was willing to lead us himself, with one condition. 25% of any artifacts or discoveries would be documented and returned to the indigenous communities of Chiapas. Dr. Miller started to object. Standard archaeological practice would mean artifacts go to research institutions or museums. But I cut him off. This wasn't about institutional politics or academic credit. This was about finding answers. If Juan could get us there safely, he could have 50% for all I cared. After hammering out the details, Juan left us with a sobering warning. The jungle doesn't forgive the overconfident. Coming from a man who'd spent his life in these forests, it landed like a punch to the gut. Back at our rented rooms, we repacked everything based on Juan's recommendations. Half of the equipment I'd carefully selected was now deemed unnecessary or impractical. My fancy ultralight tent, useless in tropical downpours. The high-tech hiking boots I'd spent half a month's rent on, they'd be rotting on my feet within days in the constant moisture. One provided local alternatives, heavy-duty rubber boots, hammocks with rain covers instead of tents, and machetes. Yes, actual machetes. Not exactly what I'd pictured when imagining myself following in Dad's archaeological footsteps. Our expedition began at dawn 2 days later. One had arranged for a beat-up jeep to take us as far as the roads would allow, which wasn't nearly far enough. The last portion of the drive involved fishtailing through mud so deep I was sure we'd get stuck at any moment. My stomach churned with each lurch of the vehicle, and not just from motion sickness. This was it. We were actually doing this. Somewhere ahead was the area where Dad's expedition had vanished. I touched the pocket watch in my jacket, its familiar weight somewhat reassuring. When the jeep would go no further, we shouldered our packs and continued on foot. The humidity hit like a wall, instantly soaking my clothes with sweat. The jungle closed around us, a tangle of green so dense it was disorienting. Juan moved ahead, occasionally hacking at vegetation with his machete, while Dr. Miller, Emma, and I followed single file. I brought a drone, thinking it would help us scout the terrain. On the first day, I managed to get airborne during a brief rest stop, but the canopy was so thick that it revealed almost nothing useful. When I tried again the next morning, a sudden rain shower nearly destroyed the thing. After that, the drone stayed packed away, another piece of technology rendered nearly useless by the jungle. Emma had more luck with her approach. She developed a program that analyzed topographical data and compared it with descriptions from Dad's journal. Each night, huddled under a tarp while rain drummed overhead, she'd input the day's observations and adjust our route. Her ability to merge old-school archaeological knowledge with modern tech was impressive. Even Juan raised an eyebrow when her predictions about terrain features consistently proved accurate. 5 days in, disaster nearly struck. We were crossing a river that had been a gentle stream on Juan's previous visits, but was now a roaring torrent after days of rain. Juan secured a rope system for us to cross, and we were making slow progress when Dr. Miller lost his footing. The current immediately swept him downstream, his pack weighing him down. Juan reacted instantly, racing along the bank while I froze in panic. Emma, however, was already moving. She dropped her pack, grabbed the emergency rope, and sprinted downstream, somehow getting ahead of where Dr. Miller was being carried. What happened next was both terrifying and incredible. Emma waded in at a slightly calmer section, anchored herself against a rock, and managed to get the rope to Dr. Miller as he passed. The force nearly pulled her in two, but one reached him in time. Together, they hauled Dr. Miller to shore, waterlogged and scraped up, but alive. That night, as Dr. Miller recovered in his hammock, I sat with Emma under our makeshift shelter. The near disaster had shaken all of us. I asked her where she learned to move so quickly in an emergency. She shrugged and said that after her mom died while she was in high school, she'd thrown herself into wilderness training as a distraction. Rock climbing, swift water rescue, first aid, anything to keep busy and feel in control of something. It was the first truly personal thing she'd shared since our reunion. In that moment, huddled in the jungle with rain pounding around us, I felt something shift between us, a deepening of trust, a recognition of shared pain. Day 7 brought a new challenge. We were picking our way through a particularly dense section of jungle when Juan suddenly froze, his hand raised for us to stop. A rustling sound came from the trees above, followed by what I can only describe as monkey battle cries. Before we could react, we were under siege by a troop of spider monkeys. They swooped down from the branches, screeching and grabbing at our packs. One particularly bold monkey landed on my shoulders, its little hands yanking at my hair as it tried to unzip my backpack. I spun around like an idiot, trying to dislodge it, while one shouted to protect the food supplies. It was chaos. Emma was swatting at a monkey that had made off with her notebook. Dr. Miller was trying to shield his camera equipment. And me? I was dancing around with a primate on my head, probably looking like a rejected America's Funniest Home Videos contestant. The monkey heist lasted maybe 2 minutes, but felt like an eternity. When they finally retreated, they took half our fruit, a bag of trail mix, and one of Emma's socks. One seemed more amused and concerned, explaining that the monkeys in this area had learned that humans carry food. The look on Emma's face when one casually mentioned that they'd be back was priceless, a mixture of outrage and disbelief that these fluffy bandits were now a recurring threat. Despite the comedy of the monkey attack, the expedition was taking its toll. The constant heat and humidity were exhausting, and even Emma, who'd been our rock through river crossings and difficult terrain, was starting to struggle. She tried to hide it, but I noticed her movements becoming sluggish, her face flushed with more than just the heat. That evening, she finally admitted to feeling unwell. Her normally pale skin was alarmingly red, and when I touched her forehead, it was burning hot. Heat exhaustion, one diagnosed, ordering immediate rest and hydration. As she lay in her hammock, I soaked bandanas in the coolest water we could find and placed them on her forehead, neck, and wrists, just like the first aid training had taught us. I stayed with her through the night, replacing the bandanas as they warmed and making sure she kept drinking water. Somewhere around midnight, her fever broke, and she grabbed my hand. I expected her to thank me, but instead she whispered, "Your dad would be proud of you, you know." The words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on finding answers, on proving Robert wrong, that I hadn't considered what Dad would actually think of this journey. Would he be proud, or would he be horrified that I was risking my life chasing his obsession? By morning, Emma was improved enough to continue, though we adjusted our pace to accommodate her recovery. One estimated we were now close to the area where Dad's expedition had last been in contact before the landslide. I found myself studying the terrain more carefully, half expecting to find some sign of their passage, some clue to what had happened. On day 10, something extraordinary happened. We had just emerged from a particularly challenging section of jungle into a small clearing when I spotted a rock formation that made my heart skip. 3 boulders, arranged in a formation that looked exactly like the Eye of the Rain God sketch from Dad's journal. I pulled out the pocket watch, checking the time, just past 3 p.m. According to Dad's notes, the formation would only resemble the deity's eye when the sun hit it from a specific angle. We were hours off, but just finding the formation confirmed we were on the right track. Emma's software had led us true. We made camp nearby, planning to observe the rocks at the correct time the next day. That night brought the heaviest storm yet. Rain so intense it felt like the world was ending. Lightning cracked the sky open every few minutes, illuminating our camp in harsh flashes of white. Sleep was impossible, so we huddled together under the largest tarp, watching nature's fury unleash around us. Around midnight, a particularly close lightning strike lit up the entire clearing. In that split second of illumination, I saw something that made me doubt my own eyes, a narrow opening in the rock face behind the eye formation, visible only when lit from that particular angle. I nudged Emma and Dr. Miller, pointing frantically, but the darkness had already swallowed it again. They thought I was seeing things, and honestly, I was beginning to wonder myself. Juan, however, was more open to the possibility. He suggested we investigate at first light, if the storm allowed. The rain slackened just before dawn, leaving the jungle dripping and the ground a muddy mess. We approached the rock formation cautiously, searching for any sign of the opening I thought I'd seen. After 20 minutes of fruitless examination, frustration was setting in. Had it been a trick of the lightning, a shadow playing on wet stone? It was Emma who suggested we try to recreate the conditions. If the opening was only visible when lit from a certain angle, perhaps we could use mirrors to direct sunlight in the same way the lightning had. Dr. Miller dug out a signal mirror from his emergency kit, and we spent the next hour trying different angles. Nothing worked until the clouds momentarily parted, sending a shaft of sunlight into the clearing. Emma, positioned on a fallen log, caught the light on her mirror and directed it toward the spot where I'd seen the opening. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as she adjusted the angle slightly, the light revealed what the darkness had hidden: a narrow crevice, barely wide enough for a person, partially concealed by vines and moss. Juan approached it first, machete ready to clear the vegetation. As the vines fell away, the crevice widened into what was unmistakably a man-made passage. Stone blocks lined the walls, worn by time but clearly carved by human hands. Maya glyphs decorated the lintel above, ancient writing that Emma immediately began photographing and translating. Her hands trembled with excitement as she worked. According to her preliminary translation, the inscription mentioned the city where time stands still and the realm of the jaguar god, phrases consistent with the Itzmal legends. We stood at the entrance, for mud-covered, exhausted explorers staring into a darkness that had waited centuries to be rediscovered. Beyond that passage potentially lay the answers I'd been seeking for years: what had happened to Dad, whether Itzmal was real, and what secrets it held. Dr. Miller prepared a light. Juan checked his machete, and Emma readied her camera. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Dad's pocket watch in my hand. Time reveals all mysteries, I whispered to myself. Then I stepped forward, into the passage that would lead us into the heart of Itzamul. The narrow tunnel sloped downward, the air inside noticeably cooler and smelling of earth and something else, something ancient. Our headlamps cut through darkness that hadn't been disturbed for who knows how long. The passage twisted and turned, the ceiling occasionally so low we had to crouch. After about 50 meters, it began to widen, the roughly cut walls giving way to precisely fitted stonework. And then, without warning, the passage opened up. Our lights couldn't reach far enough to see the full extent of what lay before us, but what they did reveal took my breath away. Stone buildings, partially reclaimed by jungle but unmistakably grand in design. A broad plaza paved with flat stones, and at the center, a stepped pyramid similar to those at Tikal or Palenque, but with architectural elements none of us had ever seen before. As we stood there, frozen in awe, a flash of lightning from the storm still raging outside briefly illuminated the entire scene through some opening in the cavern ceiling. In that instant of clarity, I knew without a doubt we had found Itzamul. Dad had been right all along. Now we just had to discover what had happened to him, and what secrets this lost city held that were worth both finding and perhaps dying for. Dawn broke over Itzamul, sending shafts of golden light through gaps in the cavern ceiling. After a few hours of stunned exploration the night before, we'd set up camp in what appeared to be an ancient courtyard. None of us slept much, too wired on adrenaline and the weight of what we discovered. That morning, we began a systematic survey, with Dr. Miller documenting architecture, Emma photographing and translating glyphs, and Juan keeping a watchful eye on our surroundings. I focused on comparing landmarks with Dad's journal sketches, trying to trace his footsteps. The city was smaller than Tikal or Palenque, but astonishingly well-preserved. Many structures still had intact roofs, unusual for Maya ruins, which typically lost their limestone ceilings to centuries of rain and vegetation. The central pyramid rose in 7 tiers, with a temple structure at its peak. According to Emma's translations, the site had been dedicated to a fusion of the rain god Chak and the jaguar deity that protected the passage of time. Midway through our second day of exploration, I found it, the sign I'd been unconsciously searching for since we arrived. In what appeared to be administrative quarters near the central plaza, a small silver object gleamed in the beam of my flashlight. I nearly missed it, half buried in centuries of dust, but something made me stop and look closer. It was a pen, not an ancient artifact, but a modern ballpoint with UC Berkeley Archaeology Department printed on its side. Dad's expedition had definitely been here. I called the others over, and we began searching the area more carefully. Within an hour, we found more evidence: a modern compass, a broken camera lens, even a shred of waterproof mapping paper with Dad handwriting. The excitement of confirming his presence gave way to a gnawing anxiety. If they'd made it here safely, what had happened afterward? Where were they now? The answer came that afternoon, in the temple atop the central pyramid. Dr. Miller and I were documenting a series of relief carvings when Emma called out from a side chamber. Her voice echoed strangely, tight with emotion. I found her kneeling beside a small stone altar, holding something that caught the light from her headlamp. She held out wordlessly, and my heart stopped. It was a pocket watch, tarnished and weathered, but unmistakably familiar. I took it with trembling hands and opened the case. Inside, the inscription confirmed what I already knew. Time reveals all mysteries. Dad's watch, not the one he'd given me, but its twin, the one he'd kept for himself. For years I'd imagined finding his remains in some landslide or ravine. Never this. Proof he'd made it to Itzamul, achieved his life's dream, only to, what? Emma placed her hand on my shoulder, while I turned the watch over and over, as if it might somehow speak to me. Dr. Miller examined the chamber, his expression grim. There's no evidence of violence, he noted quietly. No signs of struggle or remains. Then what happened to them? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Juan, who had joined us, pointed to the walls of the chamber. Unlike the main temple, decorated with elaborate carvings, this room was relatively plain, except for markings near the floor level, recent markings made with the charred end of a stick. They were field notes, archaeological shorthand about magnetic anomalies, and what appeared to be a hidden chamber beneath the temple. The handwriting matched Dad's journal perfectly. "They found something," Emma whispered. "Something beneath us." Under the stone altar, we discovered what Dad's team had been searching for, a narrow shaft leading downward, with crude handholds carved into the stone. Someone had rigged a rope system, now frayed and weathered but still partly intact. Juan inspected it carefully, then shook his head. "Not safe to use now. We need new equipment if we want to go down there." I was already pulling spare rope from my pack. There was no way I was stopping now. With proper safety precautions and Juan's experienced guidance, we began our descent. The shaft dropped about 30 feet before opening into a low tunnel. Following it, stooped over to avoid the ceiling, we emerged into a space that took my breath away. It was a ceremonial chamber, larger than any other room we'd seen in Itzmal. Phosphorescent minerals in the walls, and ceiling gave the space an eerie blue-green glow. At its center stood an imposing statue of Chak, the rain god, his features carved with extraordinary detail from a single block of jade. And all around the room, placed with careful precision on stone pedestals, were gold artifacts, masks, jewelry, ceremonial weapons, and astronomical instruments. The undisturbed treasure of Itzmal, hidden from Spanish conquistadors and modern looters alike. But what immediately caught my attention wasn't the gold. It was the modern equipment scattered around the chamber: cameras, lighting rigs, sample containers. Dad's expedition had been here, documenting everything meticulously. "Look at this," Dr. Miller called, examining what appeared to be an ancient calendar disc made of hammered gold and inlaid with jade. The date notations don't match any known Maya calendar system. This could rewrite our understanding of Mesoamerican chronology. While they marveled at the academic significance, I was still searching for answers about Dad. Near the statue of Chak, I found his field notebook, protected in a waterproof case. The final entry was dated 3 days after the landslide that supposedly claimed the expedition. Asters found primary cache beneath Chak Monument. Extraordinary preservation. Calendar system appears to use Venus cycle as primary marker rather than solar year. Could explain astronomical anomalies in other sites. Asterisk. Asterisk radio still isn't working. Mendez will attempt to reach high ground tomorrow for signal. Storm continues above. Water levels rising in lower tunnel. May need to move artifacts to higher chamber if rain continues. Asterisk. The entry ended there. I looked up from the notebook to see Emma watching me, understanding in her eyes. "They got trapped," she said softly. "The storms caused flooding in the tunnels. The same rains that caused the landslide had likely flooded their escape route. They'd been here, surrounded by one of the greatest archaeological finds in history, but unable to tell the world about it or call for help." Before I could process this, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. One looked up sharply. "The rains. We need to leave now." We barely had time to document the most significant artifacts and take sample photographs before water began seeping into the chamber. The storm above had intensified, and just like Dad's expedition, we were at risk of being cut off. As the water rose around our ankles, we frantically implemented emergency conservation measures, techniques Dad had taught me years ago on our summer expeditions. We documented positions, created protective coverings from our gear, and secured smaller artifacts on higher pedestals. Emma worked feverishly to photograph every inch of the calendar disc, while Dr. Miller dictated observations into a waterproof recorder. Juan kept urging us to hurry, monitoring the water level with increasing concern. When it reached our knees, we had no choice but to retreat, taking only what we could carry without damaging it. Dad's notebook, a small jade figurine that had fallen from his pedestal, and comprehensive documentation of the site. The ascent through the flooding shaft was a nightmare I still have flashbacks about. Juan went first, securing ropes for the rest of us. I was last, watching the water rise below me as I climbed, wondering if this was what Dad had faced, and apparently overcome since we'd found no remains. We made it out just as the lower chamber completely flooded. Soaked and exhausted, we retreated to the main temple, where we watched water slowly fill the shaft until it overflowed onto the temple floor. The hidden chamber was once again sealed by nature, but we had what we needed: proof of Itzmel's existence, documentation of its cultural significance, and evidence that Dad's expedition had succeeded in their quest. Most importantly, we had his notes detailing discoveries that would transform our understanding of Maya civilization. That night, as rain pounded the ancient city, I sat by our emergency lantern, reading through Dad's notebook. The final pages revealed that his team had discovered an alternate exit, a series of tunnels leading to the far side of the ridge. They had planned to use it once the waters receded, taking their documentation with them. According to his calculations, the flooding would subside in roughly 2 weeks. They had supplies for a month. There was no mention of danger or fear, just academic excitement about their discoveries and detailed plans for proper excavation once they returned with a larger team. Yet they never made it back. Something had happened between that final journal entry and when they were supposed to emerge from the alternate exit, maybe another landslide or an unmapped cavern collapse. Perhaps they'd gotten lost in the tunnel system. Without exploring that exit ourselves, impossible now with the current flooding, we might never know for certain. But one thing was clear: Dad had succeeded. He'd found Itzmel. He'd documented its treasures. He hadn't died in a random landslide before reaching his goal. Whatever had happened afterward, he'd achieved what he'd set out to do. The journey back to civilization was grueling but uneventful compared to what we'd endured. Juan's expert navigation got us to a small village with phone service, where Dr. Miller contacted his university colleagues and the Mexican archaeological authorities. What followed was a whirlwind of activity: government officials, archaeological teams, media frenzy. The discovery of Itzmel was hailed as the most significant Maya find of the century. When experts assessed the artifacts we documented, though not removed as they remained safely preserved in the still inaccessible chamber, their estimated value exceeded $20 million, though their historical and cultural value was truly incalculable. The most spectacular piece, visible only in our photographs and videos, was a golden mask of what appeared to be an Itzmel ruler. It became the centerpiece of a special exhibition at Mexico's National Museum of Anthropology, drawing record crowds and international attention. As for me, I found myself in a position I'd never anticipated. Overnight, I went from college dropout to archaeological wunderkind. Universities offered scholarships, museums requested lectures, and publishing houses dangled book deals. The story of a son completing his father's quest made for compelling headlines. The financial side was equally transformative. Though we hadn't removed the gold artifacts, and wouldn't have wanted to, they belonged in proper institutions. The discovery rights and subsequent documentary deals, book advances, and consulting fees amounted to a substantial sum. My share came to just over $5 million after taxes. Enough to purchase a modest but beautiful home in the San Francisco hills with a panoramic view of the bay. I set it up with a library/office that had enough wall space for maps and enough shelf space for the growing collection of reference books I was accumulating. Emma and I grew closer throughout the post-expedition chaos. She finished her master's thesis on Itzmel's unique epigraphic elements, which earned her immediate academic recognition. We found ourselves giving joint presentations, finishing each other's sentences while explaining the significance of various discoveries. It was during the formal ceremony transferring our documentation to the Mexican government that I finally acknowledged what had been building between us since those nights in the jungle. As we watched officials catalog the digital records of artifacts that might not be accessible again for decades, Emma leaned against my shoulder and murmured that we'd have to find another lost city to top this. Something clicked into place. I turned to her and asked if she'd consider making our partnership permanent, professionally and personally. Her response was to kiss me in front of the assembled dignitaries, anthropologists, and press corps. The photo of that moment ended up in National Geographic, captioned "Romance Among the Ruins." Emma moved into my San Francisco home, converting the sunroom into her translation workspace. Between lecture tours and consulting jobs, we established a white foundation dedicated to ethical archaeological practices and supporting indigenous communities' cultural heritage preservation. A quarter of all foundation funds specifically supported educational initiatives in Chiapas, honoring our agreement with Juan, who had become both friend and occasional expedition partner. With the foundation gaining momentum and our professional reputation secured, we began planning new expeditions, this time with proper funding, equipment, and permissions. Emma's linguistic expertise, combined with my knack for terrain analysis, learned from Dad, made us a formidable team. About a year after the Itzmal discovery, as our story faded from headlines but not from academic circles, I received an unexpected email. Mom wanted to meet for dinner. She'd seen an interview I'd done on a national morning show and wanted to reconnect. Robert wouldn't be joining us, she added, as if that would be an enticement. I agreed with more trepidation than I'd felt staring down that flooded shaft in Itzmal. We met at a neutral location, a mid-range restaurant near the Embarcadero. She looked older than I remembered, more hesitant. The conversation was strained at first, full of safe topics and awkward pauses. Finally, she addressed the elephant in the room. She apologized for not defending Dad's memory, for letting Robert push me away, for choosing her new family over supporting me. The word seemed genuine, if overdue. She showed me pictures of Michael, now a toddler, and mentioned that she and Robert were taking some time apart. I didn't press for details. Instead, I told her about the expedition, about finding Dad's watch and notebook, about confirming that he'd achieved his dream before whatever fate had befallen him. She cried a little at that part, which surprised me. When she suggested I come for dinner sometime, meet Michael properly, maybe bring Emma, I thanked her but didn't commit. I explained that while I forgave her, my life had taken a direction I never expected. My family now included Emma, Dr. Miller, even Juan, people who believed in me and supported my journey when she couldn't or wouldn't. She nodded, disappointed but understanding. We parted on civil terms, with a loose agreement to stay in touch. It wasn't a Hollywood reconciliation, but it was something, a closing of one chapter, if not a beginning of another. 6 months later, Emma and I were in Guatemala, following a series of clues about another potentially undiscovered Maya site, the legendary city of the Jaguar. We'd applied the same methodology that had led us to Itzmal, combining ancient texts with astronomical alignments and modern terrain analysis. On our third day of exploration, we crested a ridge and saw it. Stone structures barely visible through canopy, but unmistakably man-made. Emma grabbed my hand, her face alight with a thrill of discovery that I now recognized as addictive. As the sun began to set over the jungle, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, I took Dad's pocket watch from my pack, the one he'd given me, not the one we'd found. Its steady ticking had accompanied me across thousands of miles and through experiences I could never have imagined that night in Yosemite when he first showed me the jade pendant. I'm continuing his work, I told Emma, watching the fading light glint off the watch's silver case. And I know he'd be proud of us. Emma smiled, squeezing my hand. You know what they say, legacy isn't leaving something for people, it's leaving something in people. As darkness fell and the stars emerged above the jungle canopy, I thought about time, how it reveals mysteries just as the inscription promised, but also how it connects us across generations. Dad's passion hadn't died in those flooded chambers. It had passed to me, transformed me, and through the foundation would inspire others long after we were gone. The ancient Maya believed time was circular, not linear, that patterns repeat, that endings are also beginnings. Standing at the edge of another discovery, with the woman I loved beside me and the legacy of my father guiding us, I finally understood what they meant.